Unprecedented changes are needed across the world to prevent a temperature rise, which would increase heat waves, flooding, drought and the loss of species.
Americans should look at this incredibly cynically. My name's Rupert Darwall. I'm the author of Green Tyranny, the totalitarian roots of the climate industrial complex. The climate hasn't broken down. I mean, Al Gore, our favourite climate warrior, talks about the climate crisis.
It's already right here.
But it's a very odd crisis. The climate hasn't broken down. So this report talks about the climate's going to break down. Is it in 2040? It's just slightly, so they don't actually. It's slightly over the horizon, or it's just on the horizon. So we're aware of 2040, but we're not going to be held to our forecast. But the interesting thing is that so many of the forecasts or the predictions made at the outset of this in 1988, the forecasts were way over the top, way over the top. And there's a consistent pattern of them over-predicting warming, which of course hasn't happened. And what the IPCC has done is made a made-to-measure report justifying why the world should hit this absurd 1.5 degree target. And the giveaway is it's 1.5 degree above temperatures before the Industrial Revolution. That is the giveaway, because this is really saying the crime humanity is inflicting on the planet is industrialization, which of course is the thing that's made us wealthy, live longer, etc., etc. The most powerful country that has progenitor of this idea is Germany. And Germany is a completely conflicted country when it comes to industrialization. Its power is based on industrialization, is the foremost industrial power in Europe. It was the basis of the power it had in the 20th century and launching 2 world wars on the basis of its industrial power. On the other hand, there's a very strong current in German culture and philosophy that is strongly hostile to industrialization, this we were better off when we lived in the forest kind of thing. Industrialization is ruining what it means to be German. And you see that even during the Nazi period, you see this strain of anti-industrialization, and it happens to be the case, as I described in my book, that the first political party anywhere in the world to have a wind power program was the Nazi Party. And 6 weeks after invading the Soviet Union, Adolf Hitler was telling his dinner companions that wind power is the future. Germany is a complete climate fraud. And its criticisms of the United States are completely hypocritical. No other country has reduced its emissions more than the United States, and that's not as a result of policy. Principally, it's because of fracking and natural gas. Shale, the extraction of natural gas from shale. Angela Merkel has herself admitted growth has meant that they haven't been able to cut their emissions. So one of the things to remember is that economic growth for Germany has meant rising emissions. So its criticisms of the United States are completely hypocritical. The thing to realise about the IPCC is the I stands for intergovernmental, and their reports are written, they are supervised, the authors are appointed by the governments. The government's civil servants, government ministers review what they write. They make changes. So this is a made-to-order report to justify what politicians have already decided. And the United States really should see it in that light. I think Donald Trump has fundamentally changed the whole politics of climate and energy, because pulling out of the Paris Agreement, but most of all talking about American energy dominance. And there is no country in the world which has more to lose from decarbonisation. The United States is the world's hydrocarbon superpower. It's got 500 years reserves of coal. Fracking has turned it into the world's leading supplier of oil and gas. And that fundamental change means that the US can go on a different path and take some of the rest of the world with it, one hopes. Australia was told by the IPCC and the UN that it should think about closing down its coal mines. Australia is the world's largest exporter of coal, and it basically told the IPCC where they could shove it. So there are countries out there that are like-minded countries, and what the United States and what the new ambassador a new ambassador at the UN should be doing, is looking around to create allies, find those allies, and create a solid bloc of countries that sees this problem the same way as the United States.
That's why today I'm proud to officially endorse Earth for Congress.
I'm Earth, and I approve this message.
One of the things about Al Gore that surprised me, particularly when I was researching my first book, is how, perhaps I shouldn't say this, but how widely disliked he is by people on that side of the debate. For some reason, I haven't got to the bottom of it, but they really, really don't like him at all. And yet he's kind of up there, and he's sort of, so I think the more people see of him, probably the better. What was interesting, it wasn't a polar bear, because the polar bear has been the symbol for the global warming cultists, that the polar bear is the symbol of the species that was going to be wiped out by global warming. As we know, their numbers have been increasing, not decreasing. So it's quite interesting that they switched from that nice, cuddly, carnivorous polar bear that goes out hunting human beings to penguins. I thought that was quite interesting. What scientists and all these academies, the American academies now, the Canadians were very hot on, the Europeans, they all said, oh, acid rain's a big problem, we understand the science is more sound than anything else, all these other environmental problems such as global warming, they turned out to be wrong. So very important to remember that. The other thing where scientists have got a really bad, their record is really bad, was on, if you remember, the nuclear winter scare. So this thing was actually, it turned out it was actually cooked up by the KGB. It was planted in Stockholm by Andropov when he was head of the KGB. And it was taken up by American scientists, by the big American foundations. They had a conference not far from here. And it was all about denouncing the Reagan administration's arm build-up. And essentially they were acting as sock puppets for the Kremlin. There was even a video link with the Kremlin at that conference, paid for by one of these foundations. The science was absolute rubbish, and with the exception of two climate scientists, all the whole cast that went into global warming, they all followed. So the idea that scientists have some kind of superior knowledge of scientific truth and are always right is complete. It is falsified by those two scares from the 1980s. But what the Greens want, and what this is about, is a fundamental change. They want a post-industrial society. It is a war against industrialisation. You're talking trillions for what? For unreliable electricity. Something, you flick a switch, the light comes on, your computer stays fired up. That is what, when you go to weather-dependent, intermittent wind and solar, you can forget that. And to deal with the intermittency of wind and solar, you have to invest a huge amount more in gas and coal-fired plant that just stays idle when the wind's blowing. It's a war against the modern economy, and it's also fundamentally a war against the middle class. Who if you're super rich, you get by. You'll go to skim all. This is fine. You can pay higher energy costs. You can fly private jet. But it's the middle class and blue collar most of all who bear the burden of all this, which is why it's why Donald Trump won in 2016.